So welcome to another episode of Choices. Today we're joined by Matt Armstrong, who's obviously a partner in Complete Wealth and someone I know quite well. But one of the things I guess is not necessarily as obvious as Matt. Matt's had a very long and successful background in sport, and particularly cricket, and played and been involved in cricket at a pretty high level, both as a player and a coach, administrator, etc. And so today one of the things that we wanted to explore is the experience of that and what choices you made, Matt, in terms of how you got into that position in the first place and what impact that's had in terms of the way you make choices in other areas of your life. But what I'm particularly interested in exploring is that relatively unique opportunity that relatively high-level sports people get to be in those high-pressure moments in a team environment, particularly with cricket, which is a fairly sort of unique sport in that it's an individual sport played by teams sort of thing in terms of the contest. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe you start off with a little bit of background about, your cricket and how you got into and the sort of cricket you've played in particularly your early career.
Yeah, I guess, look, as a kid, I think like a lot of people, you grew up watching cricket on TV and playing in the backyard. So that sparked the interest. And then I think from there, probably a couple of parents or coaches took interest in me when I was younger. So I think that's a key thing for young people when they get started in anything. If there's an adult or there's some senior people around, whatever group it is, whether it be sport or a dance class or whatever it might be, if there's somebody who takes an interest in you when you're younger, then you're more likely to continue. So that's one of the key things I think for coaching young kids is that you do sort of show a bit of interest in all the kids, not just the ones who are already at high performance level, especially when they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And
so was that an example of someone took an interest in you because of a particular ability or performance level, or was it, did they find the good kid that they wanted to make better, or was there some other connection that drove that, do you think?
No, I think, look, there was a guy there who was the coach, a bloke by the name of Phil Heaney, so his son played in the team, and myself and Stuart were pretty good friends, so he had a good ethic around coaching, and he sort of brought everybody up from the worst player to the best player, all got a fairly good substantial amount of attention, and he had a good knowledge of the game, so we rolled that out across everybody and made sure that everybody enjoyed their cricket first and foremost, and then from there we were quite successful. So I think we won our first premiership as 12-year-olds, so some people go their whole career and never get to play in a final, let alone win a flag. So for us, we got a good exposure to what a good team can do versus what a group of individuals who are champions can do. So we learned those lessons pretty early, and I think that was a good starting point for my career in cricket and business and life to start with.
Okay, and so as a young cricket player, was there, sport with kids can often be sort of dominated by much larger kids or, kids who have, older siblings that have really kind of taught them to play or whatever. And you end up with a team with, one or two basic champions. Cricket's one of those sports that's a bit harder to do than, say, something like basketball where you just give it to the big kid who can score. The team back at that stage, was it a balanced team? Was it sum of performances, or was there really one or two players already starting to stand out?
Yeah, look, we definitely had some really good players coming right through. So I grew up in Tuggeranong, which was a pretty populated place at the time. So we would have, each age group would have 3 or 4 teams. So you'd have your Div 1 through to Div 4. So we had some pretty good players first and foremost, and then from there we had some good coaches and some good parents that were around it that helped sort of mould that into a team, and everybody had a role in that side. It wasn't just our best 4 kids batted 1 to 4 and then would bowl the first 30 or 40 overs. We had a pretty good side right through that, and we managed to keep most of the people together from sort of under 12s through to seniors. People all started playing grade cricket together as 15, 16-year-olds, starting in 4th grade and 3rd grade. So keeping that continuity together and that sort of really flowed through into the culture around the club at Tuggeranong was a team first approach, and from the seniors right down to the under 12. So it was a good setup, and they had the numbers there and the people to support it, where some of the smaller clubs, you're struggling for players, you don't quite have the infrastructure of the support around it. It's a lot more difficult. It's easier to stand out as a good player in a weak club, but it's harder to keep that continuity going, and you're seeing that in a lot of sort of sporting things now. You are struggling for numbers, especially in the country areas.
Okay, well, in one of the other episodes we explored the sort of concept of cohesion with Doug from Platinum, and particularly the work that Ben Darwin's done around that idea of, players who have played together understand each other and cohesion. Cricket's one of those interesting sports because the contest is kind of always one-on-one. How important do you think, or what role do you think that cohesion played in your team and that growth through those years, do you think, on the impact on the players themselves, I mean?
Yeah, I think, look, if you have that team first approach and you're doing what you can for the other players when you're not involved in the game, if that's your attitude towards it, you're always going to play better, I think, than everybody else who might be focused on their own performance, because cricket can be a lonely game if you're not playing well. Like if you open the batting, you can get out first ball. You've got to sit there for 6 hours and watch everybody else bat for the whole day, and then you might not bowl the next Saturday. So it's 2 weeks before you've batted in the game. You're not really contributing a lot. So if you can do the things off the field, like change the scoreboard or run water, or if you're just in the game and you're cheering on the guy who's out there playing, if everyone can see that you're interested in their success, not just your own, then that sort of flows through into the types of cultures that can win championships, in my opinion. And
so those maybe not necessarily visible sort of choices that people make, that often sort of go by sort of by the wayside in terms of what people would regard as performance. They can see the work someone might put in the nets, or the hours of training, or the questions they might ask in terms of that. How important do you think those other, the sort of choices you were just talking about, those sort of 1% of commitment that don't necessarily seem like they add to the individual's performance, how important do you think they are in terms of where people end up as a result?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think you get great value out of bringing other people up. It brings reward and other things outside of your own numbers. But you see kids now, they do have a lot of attention to the screen, and they are connected to people in a different way. So the opportunity's there. If you have failed in your performance, you can come off the ground, take your shoes off and grab your phone and be back in your own world, or you can do something for the rest of the side. So that tends to be a good indicator of how engaged the team is. If people aren't participating in the game directly, what they're doing with their time. So it's a big focus in the club that I coach now is definitely around those 1% and little efforts to try and get somebody else across the line. Because at the end of the day, individual success is great, but it's nothing like winning a premiership with your mates. You do remember those sort of times, and they're the people you still catch up with 10 years on. You'll have a reunion, you'll go back. It's like you're still 14 years old and playing with those kids again. So
yeah, so that social aspect is a good way of like reinforcing good choices. Is that kind of what you'd say?
Yeah, I think so. So life is a sum of your choices. So I think there's some key things that go around that as well. So if you have a plan for your team, whatever that might be, or you have a plan for yourself, then you tend to be a lot more focused. And so there's a lot of research around goal setting and the success that people get. And, if you can kind of author what's going to happen before it happens, then you're a good chance of actually achieving it. Whereas if you just go with the flow and do what the coach says, or, you do your own little thing on the side and you start to play well and then that turns into something, I think you're a lot more likely to be successful if you do set some sort of goal or a plan for yourself and for the team. Because then you have that routine, you have something to fall back on when you do get into hard times. So, because cricket's a game where you can bowl your best ball and someone can hit it for 6. So, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a routine to fall back on, then you can get lost out there. And it happens at all levels, not just at junior level. You see international players that they get worked over by somebody else, and then it really comes down to their mental toughness, whether they can come back from that or whether they just sort of wilter and that's it, the end of their spell, and someone else takes the ball. So. I think definitely choices are important, but more importantly, making a choice to set up a plan for yourself is probably the key, in my opinion.
And so the idea of that, having a plan as a sort of an overarching framework, so that, would you say that helps sort of reduce the complexity of choices on the fly?
Yeah, definitely. So you can. Some people play a more flamboyant style of cricket. You see the players from the Caribbean, they play a different style to the people from England who are coached differently, who grew up in different environments. But I think the better players always have something to fall back on. They've rehearsed that. They've already planned for this moment, so they know what's coming. It's not a guessing game. So when they're under pressure, they know what to go back to. You look at the best tennis players as well. They have a routine. They bounce the ball X number of times. They do things that other people might think are strange. You watch Steve Smith bat, he has a very strange routine, but it's back to his routine. So if things not working for him, he just goes back into his historical sort of repetition, and it comes from there. So So definitely, I think the more you can plan things out, the better chance you have of success, obviously. And it seems to me that your brain works backwards from that. So if you set up the framework, or if you decide what you'd like to do with, whether it be your life or your sporting career or your relationship or whatever it is, if you decide what that is, then your brain will fill in the gaps, and the universe will find things, offer you opportunities that you can do and take things on to fill in that space. Whereas if you don't have that framework, you're just kind of involved in other people's choices, I guess, and you're just getting whatever comes your way. So you're more likely to achieve something, I think, spectacular if you actually plan for it, or you set those goals and targets.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that. The way I hear people sort of, especially sporting people, sort of talk about that success is very much creating those environments of familiarity. I haven't heard him talk about it, but I've heard other people talk about Jonathan Thurston as an example of being a champion, probably predominantly state of origin football player is probably where he was an example of someone who really shone in those sort of moments. And I remember watching Phil Gould once with Jonathan Thurston lining up a kick to win the game sort of thing. And he said, and Phil Gould sort of said, well, if I was backing anyone to kick for my life, I'd take Jonathan Thurston. He's not the best kicker and he doesn't have the best technique and he certainly doesn't kick the highest percentages. But when it comes time to kick the goal that matters, he just doesn't miss.
Yep.
He walks up and kicks it sort of thing. And hearing a lot of people sort of talking about being in that moment of sort of saying, okay, well, I didn't rehearse to kick the ball through the post. I rehearsed to kick the ball through the post after the siren in the game that mattered, in extra time, whatever sort of thing, and create those environments. And, hearing you talk about that sort of, to me, sort of the image I sort of had in my mind of, people doing the work beforehand to sort of create the environment to say, okay, well, when I'm presented with this, I know what the outcome is. And so that there's a limited range of choices. If the ball comes here, I'm going to do this with it. Comes here, I'm going to do this with it. Come here, I'll do this with it. And that'll happen often enough for me to get the result that I'm kind of looking for. Is that really the...
Yeah, definitely. So if you can practice that golden point moment. You don't know how it's going to go and how you're going to deal with it till you're actually in that situation. But if you've at least rehearsed for it and you have your routine to fall back on, then I think you're a good chance of slotting it over the black dot. But certainly I think there are a lot of other things involved in that moment as well. So if you want to be that 1% person, if you do want to be Jonathan Thurston, it does involve a lot of sacrifice of a lot of other things. So that does come back to other life choices as well. So I sort of was afforded some pretty good opportunities as 18, 19-year-old, but I probably didn't sacrifice the things I should have. So I still spent time with my friends. I still had the nights out. I still had the boozy Saturday evenings after the game, where if I hadn't done that, I might have given myself a better opportunity to actually get on and play a bit more sort of list A first-class cricket and try and play for my country. Whereas,
so let's talk about that. So you went through junior, obviously played quite a high level at a relatively young age. Looking back on that now, where you went with your cricket career and where you could have gone, or other sort of opportunities, was that a lack of opportunity that cost you? Do you think it was a lack of talent? Do you think how I'm interested, I guess, to explore what level you think choices had in the outcome, and more importantly, your ability to make the right choices. Because there's one thing to say, okay, well, if I had done these things, I might have had these opportunities. But if you don't know how to prepare for that golden point moment in training, then you're just not going to prepare for it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, look, I think looking back at mine, there was probably a lack of understanding of what the choices were at the time. So, so there was definitely some self-belief issues as well. That looking back now, you sort of look back at certain things, and one thing I know for certain in life is that regret is poison. So when you get older and you get the benefit of hindsight, you can look back at things and you go, well, if I just knew what I knew now, I would have dominated that moment. So having somebody around to relay that knowledge to you when you're 17, 18, 19, when you have a lot of other life distractions floating around for you, would have been really beneficial and helpful. So I certainly was afforded some good opportunities. So playing cricket in the ACT as a sort of more junior state, so I got the opportunity to go to the cricket academy and train under Rod Marsh, and I got to play in some close to first class matches against some really good opponents, and playing with people who now have played for their country and played overseas and done a lot of interesting things. So there was great opportunities for me to excel and get through the net, because it's a pretty tough road coming from a non-traditional cricket state. So one, I probably didn't respect those opportunities as much, because when you're flying and things are going well, you think that they will continue. So the door shut on that fairly quickly. when I got those opportunities and didn't perform to the level that I guess I thought I was possible for me. But thinking back on that, I think it was more my own doing anyway. So in that it wasn't anything to do with the system or anything like that. I had the opportunity to do well, and I was in that environment around the right people who were making the choices around who's going to be selected to play for the Australian under-19s, who's going to be in a Shield squad, who's going to be playing in these practice matches against the touring teams. So I was there and I was available to be selected. It's just that probably struggled a little bit with my own self-belief that I thought I wasn't quite good enough to make it at that point in time, and then I reinforced that with some of my own behaviours. Still choosing not to. I thought I was training hard, but I could have trained a lot harder. I could have put a lot more golden point moments into my training, which would have given me that opportunity to potentially overcome that self-doubt and play well at that elite level. So, and then on the social side of things as well. So I was a pretty social person, in my early 20s and late teens. So there were hours there where I was doing things that were detrimental to my cricket game. So there's a lot of things that I look back on those choices now. So I've got great friendships and great relationships out of that, and the people that I hung out with when I was 19, 20 are still my best friends now. But had I sacrificed a little bit of that, I might have had a better chance at getting through and playing first-class cricket as a job, which would have been fantastic.
So you talked a little bit about regret, and I guess that really feeds into that that choices principle we kind of look at in terms of, you need your context in terms of what's valuable and what's important. In this context, do I want to be a elite level cricket player? Then you have your framework. Well, how do I go about doing that? What's my training system and all those things? So it seems like you had those things. But I think to me, it seems like what you're saying is that accountability piece wasn't there at the time, not necessarily because no one was holding you to account, but you didn't probably understand what genuine personal accountability was. And I'm interested to see. Obviously, that's changed dramatically because you've gone on to be successful in a number of different ways since that. How important was that, learning that personal accountability lesson and learning to align the behaviour with that goal? I'm interested in exploring that sort of concept.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the biggest thing is not having a framework to make those decisions back then. So I didn't understand the outcomes of the decisions. So I didn't understand this will equal this if you choose that sort of thing. So I'm always in the back of my mind or in the front of my mind was like, this would be great. If I could play cricket as a job, it would be fantastic. So let's hope it gets there sort of thing. Not, what have the great players before me done? What's the roadmap and the template? Who are the people that you need to align yourself to be able to do that? And what are the things you need to give up to be able to create that extra time to do what you need to do? So it's pretty much you kind of have to cut ties with everything at the end of the day. If you really want to do something that's extraordinary, you can't have an escape hatch. You can't have a plan B. You can't, like I went to uni in case I didn't make it sort of thing. So you can't do those things. They just don't track towards success. And especially if you want to play elite sport in Australia, it's only 1% of the, maybe 2% of the population that actually get to do that. So there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of people that are hunting you down, trying to take that spot from you, whether you're in or you're not. So you have to kind of work out what it is early and put all your resources into that. I think Napoleon Hill talks about burning your bridges. Like, you can't lose the war if there's no retreat. There's nothing but victory or death. So if you can create that type of environment, maybe not as harsh or as radical as you might die for it, but if internally, if you feel like you would like to die for this thing, you'll be successful because you'll find all the things you need to do. You'll align yourself to the people you want to be. So if you have some laser focus around what it is you actually want, then you're very, very, very likely to actually get that, no matter how hard it might seem. If you are totally focused on that and you know what's required because you'll spend the time doing the research, you'll probably get there.
Yeah, I know looking at a lot of the training techniques of elite armed forces, one of the things they do is they literally deprive people of oxygen, so they make them drown or they restrict their ability, and it's to create that sort of thing is like, okay, when you get to that point where all you want to do is breathe, that sets that sort of most sort of inner desire goal to sort of do the next thing, and so that creates that moment of sort of saying, okay, well when you want this like you want to breathe, you'll do everything to sort of create that. But the problem with that, I guess, is one of also then in terms of balance, right? So when you do a lot of coaching now, particularly with your cricket academy, and you've done a lot of coaching for a number of years, and but even in sort of business and those sort of things, but how important do you think is it for people to have that perspective in terms of saying, okay, well, you could make these choices, but they're going to lead you down this path, and if you get laser focus and achieving that kind of 1%. Is the sacrifice of all those other things really worth it? How important do you think those discussions are, particularly for young kids early as they're trying to discover how to work hard?
Yeah, definitely. So look, the ultimate goal, I think, with a lot of that stuff is needs to be around happiness, right? So if you understand the outcome of your decisions, then you're going to be probably pretty happy with them most of the time, right? So if you understand what you have to give up to achieve this unique thing, and you decide that you don't want to do that, then that's okay, as long as that's the right decision for you. So everybody's different. So not everybody wants to be an elite player. Not everybody wants to be Jonathan Thurston. Some people want to, have a polite life and train on Thursday nights for an hour and play on Saturday, and then take their kids to school and do all the things they want to do. Not everybody wants to, be a multimillionaire. Some people like to coach basketball and earn $60,000 a year and have, a nice balanced life. So it's important to work out what's important for the individual and what they value first before you start throwing your opinions or what you might think is important on the back of them, or seeing someone with talent and saying you must sacrifice your social life and do this you could play for Australia, you should do these things. Because I think that's what a lot of the elite stuff, the talent awareness in Australia is pretty good. So identification programs are pretty good. So they find kids that are good and they stick them into programs pretty quickly. And a lot of them don't make it through the net. There's a pretty low, percentage of people that are the best player at under 14 that actually play in the NRL or play for Australia in any other sport. So identifying the right people who are actually that's what they really want to do. So there's nothing worse than being successful in something that you don't really like. Like that's a road to misery. So the fact that you can do it, so your Nick Kyrgioses of the world might not necessarily love tennis that much, hence the behaviours when it's not going well. So I think it's important to make sure that you get the right balance between what does the person actually want. So it's not so much coaching them down that pathway, it's more creating the opportunities and the environments for them to find it out for themselves. And then if there's some obvious things to correct, so, people will often get involved in behaviour that's detrimental to themselves or their family or whatever, so you should step in as a coach for that. But it's more about just creating the environment for them to work it out for themselves. Because like most things in life, if somebody tells you how to do something and just follow their instructions, it's never as rewarding as if you worked it out for yourself and it's your idea. So coach might have created the environment and it might actually be his idea, but if you actually worked it out for yourself, so you practice a square cut in your backyard and you know how to do it from watching Phil Hughes do it or something like that, then you're going to enjoy that a lot more than as if I just came out with a bowling machine and showed you how to do it for 2 hours.
Mm. That's really interesting because I guess, going back to that sort of choices principle, that sort of context and framework and accountability sort of coming together. I guess, the consistency I'm running into, and you're certainly supporting that very much, is we have to be really, really careful about that context, right? And as a coach, the temptation often, particularly if you have someone who looks like they've got the talent or they might sort of be able to make it, do they really have that desire? Do they really want to? How far do they want to take it, right? And
yep.
So, what's actually valuable to them as opposed to how valuable would it have been to you, and how vicariously are we living, or more importantly, how important is it to you to be the coach of a kid who's great, sort of thing. There's some of the things we've got to divorce. And as a coach, you can help them discover that, but you want to help them with the concept of it, because the more the more involved you are in helping someone discover their own context, the more you tend to just be sort of, influencing your own.
Yep.
The framework, though, I think is where coaching obviously really does sit in understanding, well, here's the most efficient ways we know of to create certain types of outcomes. But it's a framework, right? Someone still has to pick up on your point, you still have to work your way through that framework. And so it might be the most efficient method we know generally to do something. But you have to find your way to be able to do that kind of, repetitively, so that when you get to that accountability, when you get to that point of saying, well, why aren't I getting the results that I want? Picking up on that point you were saying earlier is, it's because I'm just not doing the work. And in the context of the rest of my life and how important this is to me, should I do more work? No, because then I won't have the social life. I won't be able to do all the other things I want to do. Or yes, I really should, because my goal is to sort of achieve that. So I think that's really interesting, point and summary to sort of say, okay, well, when we're making these choices, we've got to do them not just, in that sort of reductionist sort of, specifically we're talking about cricket, but how does it kind of fit in with life? I'm interested, with particularly the Cricket Academy, and you're doing a lot of work, with relatively young children through to sort of those really kind of formative years. And a lot of what I've done, coaching, not sort of as much at the level you've done, but a lot of the time I hear from the dads, I've been telling my kid to do X, Y, Z, and you told him once and now he does it, sort of thing. Well, I'm interested to explore that dynamic. Is that something you see a lot of? Do you have an explanation for that? Do you think why kids will listen to someone else other than their parent?
I'm not sure I have an explanation for it, but I definitely have 1,000 examples of it happening. So, it's a skill of parenting. I don't have any kids of my own, but I see the better parents. They encourage their kids to do things in a way that the kid thinks it's his idea. That's a success way to do it. Like, it's the same thing. It comes back to creating the environment for them to working it out for themselves. So if dad tells you to do something you don't like it, you go and ask mum, and mum says it's different, So kids are pretty smart, and no one really likes to take advice from their immediate relationships, I think. So, spouses rarely take advice from their partners. Kids don't.
Not the first time anyway.
Yeah.
Over time, sometimes.
Exactly.
Submission.
So another voice is often a good way to help with that, and also the perceived level of expertise also helps. So if if you're a basketballer and your dad played high school basketball and he's been the coach forever, so you might listen to your dad for advice about your mum and your family and your things that you think that he knows a lot about. But if somebody else who's played an elite level of basketball tells you to do something, you're going to sit there and listen. So that just comes from it's just a paradox that we're subjected to now. So we immediately think that the best cricket player will probably be a great coach or be a great manager or a great something else in the sport. So when you get success, you're afforded more opportunities than somebody who hasn't had that success before. So you just got to be careful about that and make sure that when you're giving advice that you're qualified to give it, because a lot of people just want to help people and they will give advice from their framework, which isn't actually very good. So that's the thing. I see a lot of unwarranted advice or a lot of coaching around kids to do things, which is kind of needs correcting, not with the kid but with the coach, to say, look, you're making them do these things that not necessarily are in their best interest. Let them work it out for themselves first. Do it a little bit differently. Set up the cones in this way so they can work it out. Don't be around and prescribe what to do, because the key thing is to teach them how to think their way through the problem themselves. Because if they can do that, if you can teach them how to think properly, and if they can solve the problem for themselves, then they're set up to deal with all challenges on the field and all challenges in life. Whereas if they're always relying on their coach to tell them what to do in the situation, and then when they turn 17, you're not their coach anymore, they're in a situation where they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with the failures or deal with even the challenges that they face. So in a world where you've got a lot of mental health problems and you've got issues with screen time and bullying and all the other gump, if you can teach young people how to think first and foremost and allow them to solve problems for themselves, then when another problem comes along, it's just another thing they can deal with. They have the coping mechanisms and the ability to do it. Whereas if you're always coaching or prescribing, you won't have thinkers. You'll just have followers.
So that's a really, really interesting insight, because again, I guess looking at a sort of cricket context, right? You're coaching and you're doing all your preparation work kind of beforehand, then you sort of set them out in the field, and then a whole bunch of things happen, and coaches can react to those outcomes in a couple of different ways. They can sort of say, okay, well, did the kid bowl the wrong ball is the first thing, right? He's just been smashed for six, sort of thing. Did he bowl the wrong ball? So was that the choice he made? Was it an execution issue? Was it a field setting sort of thing? As a coach who's now removed from that and you're sort of seeing that, how do you help them get over those moments and then get better for that next time when you can't do it obviously in real time? You've got to sort of sit back and wait for the game to unfold and then sort of try and get them to learn from what happened.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was probably more hands-on when I first started coaching, just because I was still quite heavily in playing. So there's a different role. The coach should be much different to a captain. So that was probably the thing that I learned after a while, is just to sit back and spend less time, or not be as invested in the outcome, because the outcome's a result of everything. It's more important, the process and the plan is what's important. So because you can do all of the right things and still lose your wicket as a batsman. Like, you can take the right option and be dismissed, or you can bowl your best ball and get hit for six. So the outcome is not as important as the thought process and the execution of what you were planning to do. So understanding, I guess through repetition, what you need to do when that time comes and what your options are. at least gives you something to go to. So if you're trying to bowl defensively, so you look at the way they bowl in T20 cricket, it's a lot different to the way they bowl in a test match. So there's a lot less decisions to make in a long-form game of cricket. So people that really like test cricket, the players who are playing test cricket will definitely benefit from playing short-form cricket because you have to make a whole lot of decisions in a really short period of time and you're under pressure all the time. Whereas in test cricket, you can get into a rhythm and just kind of do what you need to do and just it's a patience game. So there's a lot of different skills to learn on either side. But from a coaching point of view, it's just reflecting with the individual and with the team, I think, after the event to say, all right, well, if you get into that situation again, what are your options? And then they might roll through. So if you've just been hit for 6, so what are your options? So bowl the same ball again, bowl the change up, bowl a bit wider, identify the opportunity that you can put yourself in a better matchup against that particular opponent. So if you know the batsman's particularly strong on the leg side, you might bowl a bit slower and outside the off stump because that's a combination that's in your favour. So that might be 60-40 in your favour. Whereas if you bowl back of a length onto his hip, then it's probably 70-30 in his favour. So just understanding those matchups at the high level is what's going to be important. At the junior level, it's just around focusing more on the process and not so much on the outcome. So winning is an outcome. It's not what you should be working on as a coach. Obviously, it's your game. You're out. Your desire to win every match, but only 5% of people will win a flag every year. So that doesn't mean that 95% had a failure. As long as you're improving and you're giving your people the opportunities to one, to enjoy the game and two, to improve their skill set, then I think you're doing your job as a coach. So coaches have a responsibility, I think, to keep people in sport and keep people involved in the game because without that, without those people showing interest in the players, then you're going to lose the numbers to other things. So if you're passionate about your sport or your community or whatever it is that you enjoy, you should be doing those things to try and encourage people to stick around.
Well, that's a really interesting point in terms of outcome, not just in the result of whatever the specific measurement of game or flag or whatever sort of thing, but looking at the coaching that you do, it would be fair to say that trying to win is something you're trying to do at a micro level, but you clearly haven't sort of said, well, I'll go and coach here in this way or whatever so that I can be the winningest coach sort of thing. How important do you think is it to understand how the game itself fits into the community and what the overall purpose is versus the success on the field or between the players?
Yeah, I think it's very important. So if you it also helps you to relax, I think, into the game too. So if there's not as much pressure on the outcome, then you probably do be in a position where you are more relaxed at the crease and you play well. So if you're enjoying yourself and it's a good environment around it, you're more inclined to play well. A certain level of stress is good when you're practicing and when you're doing things, so you need to train under a little bit of duress. But if you're forever worried about the outcome, you're probably not going to be super successful. And, especially where I coach now, it's in a rural community. I'm not coaching at elite level sport, so that it's not as cutthroat. You're not going to lose your job if you don't, play in the finals for 2 years in a row sort of thing. So it's more around, I guess, keeping people involved in the game and making sure that all of the people and the stakeholders that are involved around the cricket club are kind of looked after. So the families need to have time to do their things, people who have different issues. So some kids might be working in the Rural Fire Brigade, for instance. So I've just had a pretty difficult time. So we actually lost our ground to the CFA. They covered our cricket ground in water tankers and set up camp there and were there for 6 weeks. So those type of events, you sort of realise how small your role as the coach in the community is, but you can still do your bit to support that type of environment by allowing people to go and help, or making sure that we did a working bee and build some fences and stuff like that. So being close to your community and being connected to that probably gives you more rewards than the actual sport. The game day gives you relief and a release from whatever else pressures you might have in your life. If you're out there playing sport, it's just about the game at that point in time, and it's a way for you to escape or release some pressures in your own life. But being involved in your community and having people rally around you, and when you see the support that you get, particularly in rural communities around sporting clubs, it drives the whole town forward. So it brings people to town to play. It gives people, an identity and something to get involved with, so it allows everybody to prosper, not just the cricket club.
So just in sort of summary and to sort of wrap up, is there a couple of key lessons if you were to look back on, 15, 16-year-old Matt now? What sort of lessons are you telling him?
I would just say that you do have to be accountable for your choices back then. And still not sure in my own mind whether I was making the right choice or the wrong choice. So I've had a pretty successful and enjoyable life. So had I gone down that sporting path and got into an elite program, I may not have been as happy. I might be involved, living with different people and doing different things now. So it's more just understanding what is required. If you want to do something incredible, if you do want to be in that 1% life, these are the things you'll have to do. And if you're willing to give those things up, if you're willing to do those things, you'll have to give up these other things. So work out what is more important to you and prioritise those things in your life. So when you're 16, 17, 18, you are quite selfish. It's about your life. So I would encourage people to make decisions for themselves at that stage, not make decisions for their families or other people. So what do you want? And I think if you can, even at a young age, if you can encourage people to author what their life will be like, then if they can actively make a choice around what they want to do, and then you can fill back the gaps. It'll allow you to work out what you need to do that. And the other thing, there's a guy called Jordan Peters as well. He said, that's great to set goals and do all those things, but also write down what your life would be like if you don't do any of those things. Write down what your life will be like if you follow all of your bad choices. Where will you end up? So it gives you some motivation. So it's like, all right, well, I could do this. I could be a race car driver. I could be Michael Schumacher. I could be whatever. Or if I keep going out on Saturday and I end up here, I could end up like, 40-year-old Gary over there who's drinking every afternoon and, his life's he's knackered sort of thing. So give you some motivation, but it also gives you somewhere to not end up as well. It seems to be quite productive in helping people create that framework for their lives.
And so specifically, I guess in your case, I know you're very much a believer in that sort of concept as a sum of choices, that there's no, while individual choices can explain the path someone sort of went on, it's the sum of those choices and what they learned and how they adapted those choices, really ultimately, gives it the result of a life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also the opportunities are disproportionate. So the more successful you are, the more successful your family are, the more opportunities are afforded to you. So if you're coming from a difficult upbringing, or you're not quite, if you're not the most academic, or you're not the most physically active, or whatever it might be, if you're not the best at that point in time, when an opportunity comes your way, you have to afford the respect that it deserves, because it's likely that you may never get another one. So if you can identify those opportunities and decide whether you want to take it, then you can go from there. Because if you're a movie star, you get offered another 30 roles next week. So the success doesn't just come linearly. Like you suck. Now I'm Leonardo DiCaprio. So you have to recognise the opportunities and respect those opportunities. So if you've built the framework for what you'd like your life to be like, then it's going to be a lot easier to identify when that opportunity comes along that you should jump on and throw all your resources at. So I think that's the thing for me, is to respect your opportunities and try and author what your life what you would like your life to be like. And then you can rewrite that novel, every 12 months, every 18 months, every 10 years, whatever you decide. But at least having a plan will give you a chance to get to something that you'd like to be.
All right, brilliant. Well, it's been insightful as always. Appreciate your time, and good luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.